today is this, I guess we could call it a V-block. It's wouldn't be considered a very difficult drawing, but it'll give us some of the basics and reinforce some of the things that we've already discussed. So if I look at this object and I look at the paper that we've laid out, this drawing, this V-block, is going to be in these three boxes here. Top view, front view, right side view, and then our reflection line. If you remember, we talked about how do we determine the front view of the object, and we have some rules on how you do that. And we said one of the rules was kind of the normal resting position of the object. So if I'm looking at this object, again, it's a nothing object, so I could have it rest this way, or this way, or this way, but for sake of working on it and how I want to position it, I'm going to call this the front view. Another way that we could look at it is the longest view. So this is pretty long, this is not, okay? This is pretty long. So again, I'm going to go back to here. Then we talked about the view with the most detail. Well, if you look at this, I really don't see much in here. I wouldn't want to call this my front view. I don't see much but this rectangle. So again, I'm going to go with this as my front view. One more thing, which view gives me the best right side to draw? Well, if you look at this object, don't see much there, and I don't see much there. So that's not really a major factor in this one. I'm going to call this the front view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle that will hold this object. Now remember, we've talked about proportion. So I'm basically going to, in this box where it says front view, I'm going to draw a rectangle to use to draw this object. And so this is where we start to use our sketching techniques that you learned earlier. And I'm going to use this side of the edge of the paper to try to keep the lines parallel. And I actually want to really use as big of this, much of this space as I can within reason. You can see I'm using sketch lines, and I'm trying to keep this space even as I sketch down. And now I'm just going to connect them like this. So when you look, I've pretty much used this space right here. Please don't draw a little tiny rectangle in this area. It's going to be too hard to see things. So this is what right now is my front view. And you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute though, I see a V in there. I see something else in there. And you're right, but we're not going to draw that yet. We're going to do something called blocking in a view, which means we are going to get three rectangles on our piece of paper that will house this object, that will fit this object. So we know something about the top view because of the front view. We know that whatever the length, and this is length, whatever the length of the front view is, the length of the top view is always the same. So whatever this length is, this length up here has to be. So I can take something called projection lines and transfer those lines up, but I want to use them as construction lines, very, very light. I might be drawing mine a little darker just so that you can see it better on camera. But if you take a look, I've lined up my view, and whatever the length of this is, the length of the top view is. And that's true for any object that you pick. It doesn't matter what the object is. If I take a key and I say, this is the front view of the key right here, well, whatever the length is from here to my fingernail, it's exactly the same in the top view. That's standard for any object. Now let's look at the right side view. We know something about the right side view. We know that whatever the height of the front view is, the height of the right side view is always the same. Look at this object. Whatever the height is from here to here, this is the right side view, If this is my height, watch the distance between my fingers. It doesn't change. So whatever the height of the front view is, the height of the right side is always the same. So I can project these lines over using construction lines, really light, just like this. Okay? All right. Now, I really can't go any further because from this view right here, you don't know if that is a sheet of paper, if it goes back. It could easily be just a sheet of paper like this right here. And if you look at this sheet of paper in one view, you don't know how far back this piece of paper goes. You need more information. So in this case, you actually have to see the object or be told how far back the object goes. So when we look at this, now we can get an idea of the depth of this object. And again, we're trying to sketch for proportion. So it looks fairly even. It might be a little deeper than it is tall. So I'm going to start in this upper box that says top view, because really this is what we're looking at right here. This is the front and this is the top. We're just turning it, drawing it on a flat sheet of paper, and I want to draw a rectangle that's going to fit that. So we're going to have something. I don't want to be right on this line, so I'm going to be down just a little bit. So I have something that looks like that. Looks pretty similar. Maybe I could have made this just a tad wider, and if you're like, uh-oh, I made a mistake. Well, because we used construction lines, really light lines, you can just go ahead and make that a little bit wider. And again, sketching techniques. I'm trying to keep this parallel to the top edge of the piece of paper. Your lines should be nice and straight here. They shouldn't be slanted. If they are, fix it. So now I have a block for the top view and a block for the front view, but now I have the right side view. Well, remember we have this thing called a reflection line, and there's another rule in drafting. Whatever the depth of the top view is, whatever the distance is between my fingers here, the depth of the right side view is always the same. So if you look at my fingers right here, and here's the depth of the top view. Now watch what happens when I turn to the right side. The distance between my fingers doesn't change. If you use this reflection line properly, it will give you the exact depth down here. So watch, I'm going to take these construction lines and I'm going to transfer them over. And as soon as it hits this 45, I'm going to bring it straight down. Same thing here. Now the hard part is trying to keep everything parallel, trying to keep this distance the same. So with your eye, you kind of have to look and adjust, because if you don't, you're going to get something kind of slanted over here. So your space, it doesn't have to be perfect, but your space here should be, fairly even. This should be a fairly parallel line. And now when you look, I have 3 rectangles on my piece of paper. I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to clean it up a little bit so that those rectangles show. Okay? So that you can see the rectangles right here. Okay? All that we've drawn right now, is a box. We've just drawn a rectangle. So if I take this, and I'm just going to take a sheet of paper, this is all that we've done right now. We drew a front view, and then we brought it back on an angle. I'm doing this just to show you. You're not expected to do this part. And this is what we have. This is the front view. And so if you look at that, this is what the front view looks like. Again, this is very quick, but I just want to show you. So there's the front view. Here's the top view. Look at the top view. It doesn't look like anything too impressive. It's just another rectangle. It's the same length. And then here's the right side view. So all that I've drawn here is the top, front, and right side of this 3D object. But that's not what this looks like. This has a notch in it. This has a V in it. So we have to go back now on our paper, and we have to, this is like a puzzle. What we have to do is we have to say, okay, I see this V in the front view. And so you kind of look and you estimate where center is. I'm looking at this point here, and I just take this now, and I'm like, okay, I have something that comes there, something that comes from this corner here. And again, you can adjust it. If you don't like something, erase it. It's okay. So I have something that kind of looks like an envelope. But when you look at this, there's nothing right here. This is cut away. So this line, because we drew it lightly, we can just erase it. And now what we have is a really good representation of the front view of this object. So let's look at the top of this. When you look at the top, I see the rectangle, but there's more to it than this. There's this crease right here, this line. So where does this line come from? Well, let's flip it and take a look. The line comes right from that V. So if this is the V right here, I can project a line upwards right here, just like that. And now when you look, I have the line, I have the line. This part is this part here, and this part is this part. One more thing now. I look at the right side view and I don't see anything. But I know something is there because there's this big V. How do I know what to do over here on this right side view? How do I know what the object looks like? I can't see anything. You have to depend on your other views to give you information. So this view right here, this front view, tells us something about this view. It tells us that there's a notch in there. It tells us that there's a notch. But how do we know where to put the notch? That's actually kind of easy. It depends on where the V is right here. So all we're going to do is we're going to project this line over, just like that. And when you look, that's where the notch would go. But the way I drew it as a solid line. If you cannot see the notch, but it's there, we have to show it. And in drafting, there's a certain type of line that we use, and it's called a hidden line. And a hidden line is kind of neat. It's just like a 1/8 inch dash with a 1/16 space. And it just keeps repeating itself like this. Just like that. Anytime a person who knows or understands how to read drawings sees a line like this, they know that this is something that you can't see from this right side view, but something's going on. And when they look at the other views, they can tell, oh, this is a front view. Here's the notch. There's the notch coming through. Here the line shows. Here the line shows. So actually, this is a pretty complete drawing now. This is a multi-view drawing, also known as an orthographic. What I want to do to finish this up is I want to clean it up. These lines are too light. I don't need this line here. It gets really confusing, so I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to darken in the lines that I want to show. So I'm going to turn my construction lines into visible lines. So I just darken them in. You can turn your paper. This is where you can straighten things out. Just try to make the drawing look as neat as you can. Again, don't expect you to be an expert, but we want to see the effort. Something like that for the front view. Here's the top view. And I'm just darkening in all these lines. Just like that. And the line down the middle. And there's the top view. And now the right side view. I don't even have to erase these lines that I transferred down. I just don't want them to be in the way. I don't want them to confuse the drawing. I want to keep the drawing neat and clean because drawings are a form of communication. So we're not trying to trick anybody. It's graphic communication. We want to be able to see it. If you do something like this, all of a sudden that gets confusing. Where does it end? If the drawing ends here, then these don't make sense. So erase them if you went too dark. And you want your view to pop. So now I have my top view, my front view, and my right side view. And that dash is showing the hidden line that you cannot see from just looking through here. So we need all three views to help us work on something. So that is a pretty basic orthographic drawing. And again, the reason we have orthographic drawings, because if we were building this, we could put math on there. We know the length. Each view gives two pieces of information. The front view tells you the length and the height of an object. The top view duplicates one. It gives you the length, and then it gives you another piece of information, the depth. And then the right side view duplicates one. It gives you the height, just like the front view, and it gives you the depth, just like the top view. So that drawing is complete.